The red light outside her cell just turned on. Inside a locked unit far from the rest of the prison, women wait not for release dates, but for court rulings that could decide the rest of their lives. This isn't a movie scene. This is inside a women's death row unit where every day follows strict routine, and one phone call can change everything. At 6 a.m., a red light flashes outside a steel door. Inside the cell, a woman sits on her narrow bed, already awake. Today could be the day her final appeal is denied. And if it is, the clock will start ticking. But the door does not open. Not yet. This is not a movie. This is not a rumor. This is a real women's death row unit inside the American correctional system. And life here moves slowly. Until it doesn't. Before the red light, before the appeals, before the final phone call, there is a building. It stands far from the front gate of the prison, separated from the general population. The walls are high. Cameras sit in every corner. Fences are layered with razor wire that shines under the sun. Inside this building live women on death row. They are not housed like other inmates. They are not allowed to move freely like the general population. Their world is smaller, much smaller. In most states that carry out executions, women on death row are held in a single facility. For years in Florida, that place was Lowell Correctional Institution. In California, it was Central California Women's Facility. In Texas, the Mountain View Unit. Each unit is built the same way: a long hallway, heavy metal doors, and small cells. Each cell is about the size of a parking space. A metal bed bolted to the wall, a thin mattress, a stainless steel sink, and a toilet in the open. A small desk, a narrow window that barely shows the sky. The lights never fully go off. Security never fully relaxes. Every movement is recorded. When a woman arrives on death row, she does not come quietly. She arrives in chains, hands cuffed, waist secured, ankle restraints tight. Officers walk on both sides. Other inmates never see her. Death row housing is separate for a reason. The state considers these inmates the highest security level. Even though most women on death row have no history of violence inside prison, the sentence alone changes everything. Maximum custody, limited contact, constant observation. The first days are the hardest. The cell door closes with a heavy echo, and then silence. Unlike general population inmates, women on death row do not share dorms. They live alone. Alone to eat, alone to sleep, alone to think. For some, the quiet is unbearable. For others, it feels safer than the outside world ever was. But isolation changes people. Morning count happens before sunrise. An officer walks the tier, stopping at each cell. A flashlight beam cuts through the bars. A voice calls out a number. The inmate must stand and show her face. Every day, no exceptions. After count comes breakfast. A tray slides through a narrow slot in the door called a food port. Oatmeal, bread, fruit, milk. No cafeteria. No walking across a yard. Just a tray and a locked door. Some women eat slowly. Some do not eat at all. After breakfast, the unit moves into what prison staff call controlled movement. One inmate at a time. Hands cuffed through the slot. Door opens. Escort to the shower. The shower is not inside the cell. It is down the hallway, inside a small stall made of concrete and steel. 10 minutes. Then back to the cell. Everything on death row is timed. Even fresh air. Women on death row usually get a limited amount of recreation time, often alone in a fenced yard or small enclosed space. Sometimes it's called a dog run because of how small it is. Concrete floor, high fences, sky above. Some women walk in circles. Some stretch. Some just sit and look up. For 1 hour, they feel the sun. Then the cuffs return, back to the cell. But here is what many people do not understand. Death row is not just about waiting. It is about appeals. The legal process moves slowly, sometimes for decades. After sentencing, the automatic appeal begins. Lawyers review trial records, search for legal errors, examine jury decisions, and investigate mental health evaluations. Boxes of paperwork fill small legal carts. Some women spend their days reading legal documents, page after page, highlighters, notes in the margins, letters to attorneys, The appeals process is their lifeline. A single ruling can mean life instead of death. But rulings take years. And while the courts move slowly, time inside the cell moves even slower. Mail call becomes the most important moment of the day. A letter from family, a drawing from a child, a postcard from a stranger who writes to inmates. Human contact travels through envelopes. Phone calls are limited and monitored. Visits happen behind thick glass. No touching. General population inmates may attend programs, work jobs, or take classes. Women on death row have fewer options. Some units offer limited educational programs. Some allow religious study groups, held under strict supervision. But many hours are spent alone. Alone with memory, alone with regret, alone with anger, alone with fear. At night, the hallway grows quiet, but not silent. Keys jingle, boots echo, doors slam in distant sections. Some women sleep, some lie awake, staring at the ceiling. And sometimes, a rumor moves through the unit. A whisper passed during recreation. They denied her appeal. The news spread cell to cell, carried by soft voices through vents. When an appeal is denied, the next step may be a death warrant. That means a date. A real date. Once a warrant is signed, everything changes. Security increases. Observation becomes constant. The inmate may be moved to a smaller section known as Death Watch. Brighter lights. More cameras. Officers posted outside the cell at all times. Meals documented. Conversations recorded. The woman who has lived in routine for years suddenly lives under a different clock. This is the moment the public rarely sees. No drama, no shouting, just paperwork and procedures. The correctional system runs on policy. Policy decides how many visits are allowed. Policy decides how property is packed. Policy decides how final appeals are filed. But policy cannot control emotion. Some women request a final spiritual advisor. Some write letters. Some withdraw completely. The other inmates feel the tension. Even if they are separated, they know when a warrant is signed. The air feels heavier. Officers speak more quietly. One night, a guard stops longer than usual outside a certain cell. He checks the paperwork twice. The red light outside the door flickers. Inside, the woman sits on her bed. She has lived on death row for 18 years. Her appeals have moved through state courts, federal courts, even the Supreme Court. Each time, hope rose. Each time, it fell. Tonight, the phone rings in the control room. An officer answers, listens, nods, writes something down. Down the hallway, keys begin to move. Boots echo closer. The women in their cells sit up. They cannot see what is happening, but they can feel it. The footsteps stop in front of one door. A paper slides through the slot. A voice reads in a steady tone. The appeal has been denied. A date has been set. Inside the cell, there is no scream, no collapse, just silence. And in that silence, every other woman on death row feels something shift. Because the routine they follow every day, the trays, the counts, the showers, the yard suddenly becomes fragile. The system they live inside is real. And now, it is moving forward. As the officers walk away, one inmate whispers through the vent to another, "Who's next?" No one answers. Because in a women's death row unit, everyone knows the truth. The door only opens one way, and somewhere in the building, another red light has just turned on. The night after the warrant is signed, no one sleeps. The woman in the cell at the end of the tier sits on her bed, staring at the paper that slid through the slot. Execution date. 2 words that change the air in the room. Down the hallway, other women lie awake. They cannot see her. They cannot speak to her, but they know. On women's death row, news travels without sound. Morning count happens the same way it always does. Flashlight, number, face. But today, there is something different in the officer's posture. More direct, more careful. The woman with the date is no longer just an inmate. She is now on death watch. Death watch means tighter rules, more checks, more reports. An officer must visually confirm her status every few minutes. Every movement is logged. When she showers, 2 officers stand nearby. When she eats, the tray is documented. When she makes a phone call, The time is recorded to the second. This is not punishment. This is procedure. The correctional system runs on procedure. For the other women on death row, routine continues. Breakfast trays slide through slots. Coffee in plastic cups. Bread wrapped in paper. The hallway smells like cleaning solution and warm food. Some women read legal books. Others read novels sent from volunteers. Many write letters. Writing is survival here. Letters to lawyers asking about appeals. Letters to family asking about children who are growing up without them. Letters to pen pals who have never seen the inside of a prison. In general population, inmates may share tables, attend classes, work in kitchens, or walk the yard together. On death row, movement is controlled. Most cells remain closed for nearly the entire day. Recreation is limited. Conversations happen through vents, through walls, through tiny cracks and doors. And yet, friendships form. They know each other's stories. They know who has children. They know who is still fighting in court. They know who has run out of appeals. The appeals process is slow and technical. After direct appeals end, federal habeas petitions begin. Lawyers review constitutional issues. They question jury instructions. They challenge evidence. They argue about mental health evaluations and sentencing fairness. It can take 10, 15, even 20 years. Some women grow older on death row. Hair turns gray. Hands wrinkle. The sentence does not change. In some states, women on death row have lived there for decades while their appeals move through the courts. Time stretches differently inside. Birthdays come and go. Holidays are marked by slightly different meals, maybe a slice of pie, maybe a small decoration taped to a wall in the common area during supervised recreation. But the bars never move. In the afternoon, recreation begins. One at a time. Hands through the slot. Cuffs click shut. The door opens. The walk to the yard is short but feels long. The recreation cage is surrounded by tall fences topped with razor wire. Above, the sky is wide. For 1 hour, she can walk without counting steps in a tiny cell. Some women jog in place. Some close their eyes and let the sun touch their face. Some simply sit on the concrete floor and look up. The yard is silent except for footsteps. There is no group gathering, no shared games, just one person in a small space. Then the hour ends. Cuffs return. Back inside. Meanwhile, the woman on death watch meets her lawyer in a secure room. No touching. Glass between them. The lawyer speaks calmly about emergency appeals, clemency petitions, last legal options. The governor must review the case. The courts must confirm dates. There are still steps, but fewer now. The woman listens. Her voice is steady. Years on death row have trained her to control emotion. Outside the prison walls, advocacy groups may be watching. Family members may be giving interviews. Victims' families may be preparing for closure. Inside the unit, everything feels small. Just metal. Concrete. Routine. Evenings are the hardest. After dinner trays are collected, the hallway grows quiet. Televisions hum softly inside some cells. Most units allow a small personal TV purchased through approved vendors. News channels play. Court decisions scroll across the screen. Sometimes an inmate sees her own case mentioned in a brief headline. It feels unreal. She is both the subject and the spectator. Lights dim slightly at night, but never fully turn off. Security requires visibility at all times. An officer walks the tier every 30 minutes. Flashlight beam. Check. Move on. Sleep comes in pieces. Days pass. The warrant date moves closer. The woman on death watch is allowed visits under strict supervision. Family members sit behind glass. Phones pressed to ears. Words heavy with years of distance. Other inmates feel the tension growing. They talk quietly through vents. What did her lawyer say? Is there still a chance? No one knows for sure. On women's death row, hope is careful. Too much hope hurts. Too little hope feels like giving up. One afternoon, something unusual happens. The intercom crackles. An officer calls a name, not the woman on death watch. Another name. The women in their cells listen closely. That inmate is escorted to the legal room. Whispers move through the tier later that evening. Her appeal was granted. Not freedom, but a new hearing, a new chance. The hallway feels lighter for a moment. Proof that the system can still change direction. Proof that the door does not always open only one way. But in the end cell, the red light still glows. The warrant date has not moved. As the final week approaches, staff conduct more checks. Paperwork increases. Property lists are reviewed. Personal items are inventoried. Everything is documented. This is not chaos. It is organized. The correctional system prepares carefully for every step. The other women watch the process unfold. They measure it against their own timelines. How many appeals do I have left? How long have I been here? How much time do I really have? For some, the answer is unclear. For others, it is painfully clear. On the night before the scheduled date, the hallway is quieter than ever. The woman on death watch writes letters. One to her family, one to her attorney, one she may never send. An officer stands outside her door, watching through reinforced glass. At midnight, paperwork is reviewed one final time. Up the chain of command. Confirmation required. But just before dawn, a phone rings in the control room. An officer answers. His expression changes. He listens carefully, writes something down, then walks quickly toward the end of the tier. Keys jingle louder this time. Boots move faster. The other women sit up in their beds. The officer stops at the red light door. He does not slide in a paper. He unlocks it. The heavy door swings open, and for the first time in years, that woman steps into the hallway without being escorted to a shower, yard, or visit. The rest of the tier watches through narrow cracks as officers move around her. Something is different, but no one knows what. The officer speaks quietly. The words do not carry down the hall. Then the woman nods, and suddenly, she is walking in the opposite direction from the execution chamber. The door closes behind her. Silence fills the unit. Through the vent, someone whispers, "What just happened?" No one answers. Because on women's death row, the system can move forward, and sometimes, it can stop at the last second. The hallway stayed silent long after she disappeared around the corner. For years, every woman on that tier had believed one thing. When the door opens on death watch, it means the end. But this time, the footsteps moved in the other direction. Back toward the legal wing. Back toward paperwork. Back toward time. The officer returned an hour later. He walked slowly past each cell. No announcement. No explanation. But by mid-morning, word spread. A last-minute court order had stopped the execution. A federal judge had granted a temporary stay. Not freedom. Not release. Just more time. And on women's death row, time is everything. The woman was moved out of death watch and back to her regular cell. The red light outside her door was turned off. The extra officers left. The hallway returned to its normal rhythm. Count, tray, shower, recreation. But something had changed. Every woman on that tier had just seen the system pause at the final second. They had felt how close it could come, and how quickly it could stop. Life on women's death row does not explode into chaos. It settles. The routine returns like a heavy blanket. Breakfast trays slide through slots. Legal mail arrives. Lawyers schedule calls. The appeals process begins again. Briefs filed, hearings requested, motions argued. For the woman whose execution was delayed, the fight is not over. It has only reset. And that is how the correctional system works. Slow, layered, built on procedure. Women on death row often live in single cells for years, sometimes decades. They are separated from general population inmates not because of daily behavior, but because of their sentence. Security levels are strict. Movement is controlled. But inside those walls, daily life still happens. Some women earn a high school diploma through correspondence courses. Some study religion. Some write books, poems, or legal essays. Some mentor other inmates through letters. In certain states, women on death row are allowed limited group recreation under supervision. In others, they remain separated at all times. Rules differ from state to state. But the pattern is the same: isolation, routine, waiting. The difference between death row and general population is not just physical space. It is time. In general population, an inmate may know her release date. She may count down years, months, days. On death row, time has no clear shape. Appeals can take 20 years, 30 years. Some women die of natural causes before their execution date ever arrives. Others have their sentences reduced to life without parole after new evidence or legal errors are found. The public often imagines death row as constant urgency, but in reality, it is long stretches of stillness interrupted by sudden legal movement. A letter from a court, a decision from a judge, a signature from a governor, and everything shifts again. In the evenings, when the tear quiets down, conversations drift through the vents. They talk about children, about families, about mistakes, about court rulings they heard on the news. They do not talk about the execution chamber often, not because they forget, but because it is always there, unspoken. The woman whose date was stopped now sits at her small metal desk, reading a new legal brief. Her lawyer believes there were errors in jury instructions during sentencing. If proven, it could mean a new hearing, or even a different sentence. Nothing is certain, but hope has returned in a small, careful way. Across the tier, another woman watches. She has been on death row for 12 years. Her appeals are still moving through state courts. She studies the paperwork carefully, because what happened down the hall proves something important. The system is not fast, but it is layered, and each layer can change a life. Correctional officers continue their rounds. Most treat the unit with professional distance. This is their workplace. They follow policy. They log every movement. They separate personal feelings from duty. In many interviews, former officers describe death row units as quiet compared to other prison wings. Less fighting, less noise, more routine, because everyone understands the weight of the sentence. Months pass. The temporary stay becomes a longer review. The courts schedule arguments. Victims' families are notified of new dates, new hearings. The process affects more than the inmate. It affects everyone connected to the case. Death row is not just a physical place. It is a legal space where time stretches for everyone involved. One afternoon, a legal counselor visits the tier to explain changes in federal law affecting appeals. New rulings from higher courts can change how cases are reviewed. Some doors close, others open. The women listen carefully. Even small shifts in the law matter here, because death row housing may be strict. But the real battle happens on paper, in courtrooms miles away, in arguments over procedure, in debates about fairness, mental health evaluations, jury decisions, and constitutional rights. Years later, some women will leave death row not through execution, but through resentencing. Some will remain there for life. Some cases will continue to move back and forth between courts. The public may only hear headlines, but inside the unit, life continues day by day. Wake up, count, tray, legal reading, recreation, letters, sleep. And in between, the waiting. The woman whose execution was stopped now stands in her recreation cage, looking at the sky. The razor wire frames the clouds. She has lived inside this routine for nearly 2 decades. She has seen others leave the tier, some for new hearings, some for final walks. She knows the system can move in either direction. That is what makes it heavy, but also unpredictable. As the sun lowers, she returns to her cell. The door closes with the same heavy sound it always makes. The hallway lights hum softly. An officer walks past. Flashlight beam. Check. Move on. Down the tier, another woman whispers through the vent. Do you think you'll win? The woman pauses before answering. I don't know, she says, but I'm still here. And on women's death row, still being here means something. The red light is off. The paperwork is moving. The clock, for now, has stopped. But the system never truly stands still. Somewhere beyond those walls, another ruling is being written. Another decision is being reviewed. Another name is being studied. Because inside a women's death row unit, life is not just about endings. It is about the long, complicated space between sentence and final decision. A space filled with metal doors, quiet hope, strict routine, and the sound of a clock that never completely disappears. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe for more crime documentary stories.